don't wear such strange clothes that people go, really? I can't relate to you because you look so much different than everybody else, or than everybody I know. So we're going to talk about professionalism. You need to take this with a grain of salt. And that grain of salt has to do with where you are and the individuals that you're interacting with. So if you're on the reservation, you certainly don't want to wear clothes that make people think that you're putting on airs or whatever. So you need to be able to gauge what is proper and what isn't proper for the place that you work. You don't want to wear a tie with a three-piece suit and a tie if it's off-putting to your clients. You're going to look like you're something else. Once upon a time, I worked in a hospital, and because I was trained in the military taught me to look good all the time. So I always wore a tie, a shirt and tie, and then I wore my lab coat. I looked like a doctor, and from time to time, people would accuse me of being a doctor. What could be worse than being accused to be a doctor? But I wasn't. But I dressed like most of the doctors dress. So people misconstrued who I was. They misidentified me. A professional is a person who has specialized training for a particular career who acts in conscientious, appropriate ways in the workplace. And that's professionalism. So professionalism, we're going to talk about what the professionalism of being a counselor, certainly. But there's professionalism no matter where you are. If you're working as a mechanic, there is appropriate dress that you need to wear. You certainly don't want to wear a coat and tie. I had a relative, my uncle was a heavy equipment operator. He knocked down, he had one of those things that knocked down buildings with a great big ball, he just knocked it. Anyway, so he always wore a shirt and tie to work, and a coat, of course, so that he looked good. But he wasn't trying to look good. He wasn't trying to be a professional heavy equipment operator. He was trying to look professional to his wife. So he would put on his suit. He'd go to work. He'd put on his coveralls, and when he went home at night, he would take off his coveralls, put his suit back on, and then he would go home. And his wife would make him take off his clothes outside in the garage, and then come in to take a shower before she allowed him in the house. It was really kind of an interesting situation. Anyway, okay. So being a professional involves conducting yourself in an appropriate manner, of course. That probably means your speech has to be a certain way. You need to dress appropriately for the climate, for the individuals. The individuals that you're dealing with, not only the people that are your colleagues, but also the clients that you're dealing with. You need to be organized, timely, and accurately recording meetings with colleagues and clients. You need to be prepared for your meetings. I had a meeting on Friday, and I turned out that I was the secretary, so I had to take notes and whatnot. I wasn't prepared for that, and I wasn't really prepared for the meeting. But then again, nobody's ever prepared for the meetings except the person running the meeting. That seems to be an academic climate. No one knows what's going on. What else are we doing? We're acting responsibly at all times. We behave as a mature adult, which is not the easiest thing in the world. For me, maybe for you guys, you don't have a problem with it. You need to use language that is culturally appropriate, age appropriate, understandable, and not offensive to anybody. So you need to try not to be offensive to people. Now, one of the interesting things that's going on is millennials. Well, you guys are beyond millennials at this point. Millennials are the guys that were born, I don't know, last century or something. I don't know. Anyway, offensive, it's really difficult to tell what is offensive. It's kind of difficult to tell what's understandable. I guess you could look on the internet, if you're on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever, you can see what seems to be appropriate. LOL seems to be real popular. OMG seems to be real popular. It has to be age appropriate and culturally appropriate as well. So you need to be able to gauge the culture that you're dealing with. Age appropriate, I say groovy all the time, just to date myself, that's one of the words we used to use back in the day. When I say the day, I'm talking about a long time ago. Really long time ago. A time that you guys have only seen in movies, as painful as that is. You need to speak honestly and with integrity. You need to know how to communicate information that you have, so you need to know how to do that. I guess when you read my email, you'll figure out whether I know how to communicate information properly, because I have an email. It's about four pages or 4 lines long. We'll see how we do. Don't forget, well, as I was telling everyone earlier, it's time for you to figure out who you're going to be as far as your character is concerned. We're going to have to do part of this online, and that ought to be interesting. I have some students that are only online, and for that reason, we're going to have to see if we can figure out how to interact with that select group. I'd like to do this. I think we need to do it to some extent. Even if we don't get to do very much counseling, one of the things that we're going to need to do is you're going to need to understand or how to research a select problem. So if you have a client and you want to diagnose them with depression or with cerebral palsy or whatever, you need to understand what that may entail. So you're going to have to do research. So one of the things that you're learning now by researching your character is you're learning how to actually learn what potential problems these select individuals have. We see this stuff on television all the time. They talk about this new medication, and it may potentially have side effects, of labored breathing and heart attack and maybe potentially death. Wait a minute. What's the probability of that happening if you're taking a pill for, I don't know, what are we taking pills for? Erectile dysfunction or something. Or one of those urinary pills that make you pee a lot. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. So yeah, so we're looking at all this stuff, and they always give you the worst case scenario. And the reality is, that is potentially can happen. And for that reason, we need to know exactly what the probabilities are, so that when we see this, potentially we see this in our client, or we see our client drifting in this direction, we don't go, well, it's probably nothing. It's just probably nothing, which is what we see a lot. A lot of people just ignore individuals in this day and age, and that's kind of a serious problem. I've told you stories about when I was working at Ashford. We had the one individual that seemed relatively fragile, and one of my colleagues wanted to remove him from his class, and I told him, you shouldn't do that. This guy seems a little bit fragile to me. He seems a little bit hebephrenic. Hebephrenia is where you have a fascination with gory things, with bloody things, with death. And I said, you really can't do that. What we need to do is make sure that he's okay. So we need to have a counselor available. If you want to do this, we need to have a counselor available. He's going, no, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. Well, the probability that this kid committed suicide, there is a possibility that he would have committed suicide. And he didn't. And it may have been because we were prepared for a worst case scenario. We were prepared for that. And because we addressed this, nothing bad happened. If we had ignored it, if my colleague hadn't informed me that that's what was going to happen, that he may have actually committed suicide. And then of course it would have been a tragedy, and then we would have looked back and said, this is what we could have done. Well, we did it so that it didn't happen, and that's a really positive thing. So you need to see worst case scenarios as well as not negative scenarios. I mean, we can pretend that nothing's going to happen. Every time we walk down the street, you can assume that nobody's going to drive by and start shooting at somebody. But there's always a possibility that that's going to happen. Anyway, I'm not trying to teach you to be negative. You just need to be aware of what's going on in your environment. And if you're aware of everything that's going on in your environment, and we understand that when Joe needs a root beer, he needs a root beer. Is that a root beer? It's a root beer. It's not it's an A&W root beer. It's not, okay. We need to understand these things. We need to be aware of what's going on in our environment. Okay. Each setting has different expectations. Roles vary based on different ages and backgrounds of your clients. So if you're dealing with children, you need to understand how children work. If you're dealing with adolescents, something totally different. If you're dealing with elementary school students, you're probably not dealing with anything that has to do with sex. But if you're dealing with junior high students or high school students, sex is always a factor, is always going to be a factor. As they become adults, remember, adolescents as people are moving into puberty, this is the most important thing to them, focusing on sex. As you become an adult, you become an individual. As you become an individualist, this is less important. As odd as this may seem, it becomes less important because they become individuals. And they learn, one of the things that you have to learn in high school is how to function, as a sexual being. And one of the things, the ways that we function as sexual beings is we become individualists. And that's specifically what happens. So you need to understand the age background of your clients. You need to know that up until they start puberty, the sex is the least important thing to them. Remember, Freud called this the latency period, where nothing was going on sexually. And he was right. So if you find a student that is sexualized, then now we got kind of an interesting problem, because they probably didn't sexualize themselves. They probably, someone has done something to them. Anyway, so we need to understand the different ages and the backgrounds of your clients. System size, individuals, groups, families, or organizations. What are you dealing with? Are you dealing with individuals? Are you dealing with groups? Are you dealing with, is this family counseling? Do you need to do family counseling? You need to understand that your training is only goes so far. So you can't go beyond your training. You can't go beyond your education level. It'd be nice if we could just start writing theories with our AA degrees, but the reality is that we need to understand how much education we have and how we've been trained. If we've never been trained as a family therapist, we shouldn't try to deal with family therapy. If we've never had a class in group therapy, then we can't do group therapy. I know, that thing always comes apart. It's always fun to watch people pick it up and dump all my papers all over the place. As confusing as that is. As practitioners with graduate degrees, we might have several roles. One of the roles may be that we work independently in a private practice. You will probably not start out in private practice. It costs too much money. You will probably be in a group. Work with a group. You'll have to become you may become a counselor or an educator. Right now we're looking for a social work. Someone to teach social work. It's hard, it's very difficult, because most social workers, social work has a high burnout rate, so it's very difficult to find anybody that has any degree of experience. Mostly right now we are finding people that aren't working in the field anymore. They've burned out, or they've decided to go in another direction. So we're looking for somebody to teach social work. It's really tough finding somebody. Of course, we're going to ship them out to shipwreck, because that's where our social work program is. You may be a supervisor. You may be a consultant. You may be a director. And this is all with graduate degrees. Usually a PhD as far as psychology is concerned, but in social work, the highest you can go, well, it's not the highest you can go, but very rarely do social workers get more than a master's degree. It's called MSW.
Where would a BA in psychology fit in?
In here, well, potentially, of course, this is a book from Indiana. You have to remember this is a book from Indiana. In this part of the country, on this reservation, or any reservation around the West, you can probably be a counselor. You can work at Child Protective Services. You can work on the reservation as a counselor in any capacity. If you're planning on making $1 million and moving to Phoenix and making $1 million, you'll probably need a PhD. But with a bachelor's degree on the reservation, you should be okay. I've seen it before. When I was up at Fort Belknap, the highest degree anyone had was a bachelor's degree, and they were running these programs were being run by people without degrees, people that were, just people's friends. That's how they got the job. Did I say friends? I didn't say family, right? Okay, good. Yeah, but the best individual running Child Protective Services was an individual with a bachelor's degree. She was one of my students. I was really proud of her. And she's gone, she has gone beyond that. Now she is working on another reservation, which makes it a little bit easier for her to work for Child Protective Services. When you work on your own reservation, you get involved with your own family a lot. So, or somebody else's family. Or all of a sudden, your uncle gets beat up because you took somebody away from somebody. It gets really strange. So she's working on another reservation. She's doing a wonderful job. And she's working on her master's degree, so we'll see what happens next. So yes, you can do, in this area, in the Southwest. It's different if you go east. If you go east of the Mississippi River, completely different. Their qualifications are a lot more stringent. But here we're okay. You should be okay. One task that practitioners with graduate degrees may be asked to do is act as a mediator. A mediator provides, and of course this has to do with, if you saw Dr. Austin's speech, he was talking about peacekeeping, and peacekeeping is actually just mediating. That's all it is. Who can become a mediator? Anybody can become a mediator, evidently, according to Dr. Austin, which is really kind of cool if you think about it. Because you can take care of a situation, you can stop two families from fighting just by being the individual that is the practiced ear for these two groups. You keep them from being violent toward one another or yelling at each other. And of course, that never does anybody any good. A mediator provides an impartial forum for disputing parties to discuss areas of disagreement or misunderstanding. A mediator. And of course, peacekeeping is something that you might want to do in the future or might want to volunteer for. What kind of expertise you need to be a peacekeeper? According to Dr. Austin, anybody can be a peacekeeper. All you need normally it's somebody from one of the two families. A respected individual from one of the two families.
Was it a peacemaker?
Did he call it peacekeeper or did he call it peacemaker? I don't know.
I think it's a peacemaker.
Peacemaker,
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was there listening, but evidently I didn't hear him as well as I thought.
I was there, it was good.
Yeah, he did.
A lot of information.
He did a good job. Generalists maintain expertise in a broad range of functions. Case management is one. They can work as a broker or they can work as an advocate. Case management, coordination of monitoring of services. This is something that you will do if you get into the field. Is case management. Case management is especially one of the areas that social workers deal with. Broker, linking clients with services and sources. This will be your job. If you're one of those individuals that makes connections with people, this is a really difficult thing for people that don't like to talk on the telephone. I hate to talk on the telephone. I could not do this. I could not be a good broker. If you make friends easily, people like you, people know who you are, then you can make connections with select services, select resources, so that you can call them and say, hey, I've got a family here, they don't have any food. I was wondering if you guys have any food or maybe some money for these individuals so they can go down to Bosch's and buy some food. If you're that kind of an individual that makes those kinds of friends, then being a broker would be a really great thing for you to do. As an advocate, they work in support of their client, so you will be an advocate. That's what my job is here. I am your advocate, so if you have problems with somebody, you can tell me, and theoretically I can go to that individual that you're having problems with, and I can talk to them about your problem. I can be your advocate. And I've always considered myself my student's advocate, which kind of upsets the administration sometimes. But the reality is, who is your advocate? Do you have any advocates? Are there any advocates on campus? Can you go to student services? Are they your advocates? Can you go to the president? Is he your advocate? I'm hoping student services works as your advocate
A
sometimes.
tutor would be different, huh?
A tutor
Would
probably.
be different than advocate.
Right, yeah, a tutor is giving you select information,
Oh,
okay, but they don't have a voice. Whereas a faculty member, I have a voice up here, just below the administration, so I can talk to the administration and they listen to me.
okay.
Okay. But I'm assuming there's somebody at student services that potentially works as an advocate. So if you have a problem, then you would probably go to student services first to see if you can alleviate your problem that way. And if that doesn't work, then you would come to a faculty member and tell them your story so that they can deal with it.
I would think an advisor, maybe? But
Right, yeah.
She's just telling you which classes to pick.
Right, but they also should be on your side as far as
Yeah.
that's concerned. And we've had that problem, we had that problem this semester. Individuals that wanted to join a class, and of course the advisor at student services, they're the ones that called up the faculty member and asked them if they would expand their class roster. That happened to me a couple of times. Of course, being the idiot that I am, I didn't put a limit on any of my classes, and now I've got more students than everybody else. It's okay, I'm doing fine. I graded all weekend. I got 187 students. Oh, that's the dumbest thing in the world. It takes me forever to get through a weekend. I have to come and lecture in order to just get a break. I mean, I was grading until like 12:30 last night. But I'm done. I'm all caught up. Okay. So don't put anything on the computer. No, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, you guys need to think of your histories. I've sent you a new copy. The history I handed out before we can't put online. And I'm thinking if we're going to work with the online students, that we'll need all of our records online. So go ahead and put that stuff online, and then email it back to me, and I will check it over and give you guys credit for doing it. Actually, I'm not going to grade. There's nothing to grade. All I need to know is that you did it. So your history, and you have to come up with a history. So that ought to be interesting. And a name. Don't make it too close to what your real name is. Make it somebody. And the other thing that you need to decide is what your ethnic group is going to be. It's kind of hard to be from an ethnic group that you don't know anything about. You certainly don't want to be a Pacific Islander if you've never been to Hawaii or something, or Tahiti, or wherever. You've never been to the South Pacific. But it would be interesting for our students to deal with people that are not native, potentially not native. So be careful of stereotypes. Not all white people are greedy, Curtis.
So we would pick other than Navajo?
No. You can pick Navajo if you're comfortable with that. But if you have been off the reservation and you've dealt with another group, then it would be good for our students. We need to know how to counsel people other than Navajo. We also need to know how to counsel people that are non-traditional. This school teaches traditionalism, but the reality is there are a lot of people that aren't. They don't come here as traditional students, as traditionalists. So we need to know how to deal with people other than just traditional students. Traditional clients. Yeah, this is really important. You know, we've got a spectrum that goes from, you know, wearing skulls around your neck and everything is skulls. And I know these people are out there. I know I had one in my class last semester. But you know, they go from that to everything's a taboo, and, you know, that kind of stuff, to really strict traditionalism. We can pretend that everybody's going to be a traditionalist, but the reality is you're going to be running into a lot of different people. Somebody on crystal meth, the last thing they care about is traditions. Usually that's the biggest problem that they have. Okay. Anyway, so it's just something that we need to deal with. New Age people. I don't know if you've ever run into a New Ager, the one with the crystals, dude, and they want to be Navajo, you know, so they wear the clothes, and so they can become, you know, like you. They want to be a healer, you know, that kind of stuff. Right. Right, Charlie, you're going to be a healer. Just wear your hood. I'm going to grow a ponytail and, you know, wear a bandana. That kind of stuff. You can be one of those guys if you want. I'm making fun of crazy white people. Sorry. I know some of your best friends are white healers.
Palm readers.
Palm readers. They bug me, okay? White guys trying to act like Indians bugs the hell out of them. You need to be who you are. Being professional goes beyond what you do in your interactions with colleagues and clients. Being aware of the social, political, economic, and cultural factors that impact individuals, families, groups, and institutions, and advocating for their betterment. In other words, as a professional, you need to become politically aware and politically involved with what's going on. You need to understand the laws that are being written, the laws that have been written, certainly, and you need to understand the political climate that's going on. So right now, what's the political climate? Would you say it's conservative or liberal in Arizona as far as society is concerned? What would you say?
Both.
Both?
It's conservative.
Conservative? How about New Mexico?
Liberals.
They're more liberal than Arizona?
Than Arizona, yeah.
Okay. You think?
Arizona is more conservative than New Mexico is.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. I only get to watch New Mexico
But
television.
the northern part of Arizona is a reservation.
Right.
But we're not recognized a lot of times. It's just down the valley in Phoenix, and that's where the conservatives are.
No, that's not true. Conservatives are well known within our nation.
That's how I see it.
How
I mean,
about
my
the Mormons? Are they conservative or liberal? Aren't there a lot of Mormons in northern Arizona?
Are they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
in age.
Okay, and they tend to be relatively conservative or liberal. Plural marriage up in all the way.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well.
I've heard that news.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Just one of those things that you have to think about. So we need to become politically aware of what's going on and what it can potentially affect our clients. Right now, of course, we have a president that wants to do away with the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act helps poor people have medical care. Well, what are they going to do for medical care if the Affordable Care Act goes away? What happens next? Some states bought into Affordable Care Act, some states didn't. I think this state did. I'm pretty sure this state did.
The nomination.
Well, okay, good. Anyway. So buying into the Affordable Care Act, is that conservative or liberal? If you buy into it. Is that conservative or liberal? It's probably liberal.
Liberal.
Yeah, it's probably liberal. Okay. And if you don't buy into it, states that didn't buy into it, one of the things that was happening, the federal government was giving them money to expand their Medicaid so that they had more people on Medicaid, yes, but they also had more people that were covered by insurance. Okay, so if the ACA goes away, what's that going to do to all of those poor people? These are your clients. I'm assuming some of your clients are relatively poor. Now we got a problem. If the ACA goes away, now we've got no medical care for a large majority of people in the United States. A large majority, a large minority. Millions of people in the United States will lose health care. 18 million people gained health care from the ACA. It's a lot of people. Most people in the United States, they already have health care. I've got health care. As a matter of fact, I'm on Medicare, I'm on TRICARE, which is the military, and then you guys give me a health care as well. And it's screwing up everything. I would have been better off if I had accepted your health care. So, guess what my primary insurance is? Well, it's the Navajo Nation health care. So now I can't get anything from TRICARE. TRICARE goes, well, let's bill the Navajos first, and then we may pay, and then of course Medicare is another, I got all the insurance in the world. I had a heart attack. I told you about my heart attack. I had a heart attack. It cost $150,000 for my heart attack. I paid zero. TRICARE took care of everything. Can't beat that. I loved it. However, if I had had another insurance like Navajo Nation insurance, they would still be fighting over who pays for my heart attack. Silly people that they are. What are we doing? Developing a professional identity involves developing a professional, knowing that it means to be a practitioner of your particular discipline. Scope of practice involves knowing what activities, knowledge, and skills identified by licensing board and professional organizations relate to your discipline. You need to be careful. You can't go beyond your education. You can't go beyond your training. If you do that, and somebody complains, you're going to lose your license. So you can only do what you've been trained to do. That's as far as you can go. If you've never done family therapy, you cannot do family therapy. If you've never been trained to do family therapy, you can't do family therapy. As a professional, what you will do is you will be continually educating yourself and trying to expand your expertise. You can go to a seminar, some in Phoenix, and learn how to do family therapy. And in the end, they will give you a certificate. And from that certificate, you can petition the licensing agency, which whatever licensing agency you use, and they will approve you doing that type of therapy. How's that? That's the way it works. As exciting as all that is. So you will be continually educating yourself. You'll be burned out because you worked all week, and then you'll have to go down to Phoenix or Flagstaff or Albuquerque, and you'll have to take a class. And by the end of the weekend, of course, you're just completely burned out, just like me right now. So you'll go back to counsel your clients and go, oh my goodness, this is so wonderful. Anyway, so you'll need to expand your licensing. Sometimes organizations will employ groups of professionals that they will organize into working teams. They especially do this with group therapy. They will put a number of you in a room with a group so that you can monitor them. One of you will be the facilitator while the other one is a watcher. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to see a negative reaction from somebody in the group, because you don't want anything horrible to happen. Each member will bring their own professionalism, their own culture, their education, and individual ways of dealing with clients. And this is the way it works in education. One of the reasons that I was hired to do this job, one of the reasons I was hired is because I I have experience on Indian reservations, which is different. I can assure you that it's very different from anything that most people have ever seen before. That's one of the reasons I was hired. The other reason is because I have different expertise than Sarah does. So she has a select expertise, and I have expertise in other areas. So I can teach this class. She has actually taught this class before, and she does a very good job teaching this class. But I can also teach social psychology. I can teach cultural psychology. What else do I teach? Physiological psychology. Just a whole mass of things. I have a background in medicine. So because of that, that gives me expertise in different areas that she doesn't have. So when we put the two of us together, and sometimes it doesn't quite go together, right? We don't agree on everything. But that's okay, because we have expertise in different areas. She's a cognitive psychologist, and I'm a generalist with a biological medical background. Okay, so when we do this, when we put people together, a lot of times they may not agree with one another. And they have to learn to work together. It all depends on ego. Working productively with interdisciplinary teams is an important aspect of being a professional. Sarah teaches things that I don't want to teach and I can't teach. She teaches statistics and I can't even add and subtract. Okay. So that's important. She also teaches research methods, and I do not like, I try to stay away from research. I don't like it at all, and that was her area of expertise. So we kind of go together fairly well, because she teaches the things that I don't want to or can't teach, and I teach things that she doesn't want to teach, mostly doesn't want to teach. She could probably teach all the classes I'm teaching. She'd probably do a much better job than I do, but we have our own areas of expertise. Working productively with interdisciplinary teams is an important aspect of being a professional. So the two of us getting along together, that's really important, that we agree on what's going on. Actually, we had a bit of a conflict last week. She wants to start limiting the number of people in the psych BA program. And I don't want to. I just want to keep it, just let it expand. And of course, she's correct. We need to, I mean, there's only the two of us. And even if we hire a third person, it's still going to be difficult to offer all the classes that we need to offer people so that they can get their degree. So what we need to do is start looking at cohort groups. We didn't imagine that the psych program would be over 100 people 2 years into the program. We anticipated 20, maybe 25, or she did. I wasn't even here at that time. But wow, we got over 100 people. I know, it's amazing. And there are people knocking on the doors, trying to get in. And we're just going to have to put a limit on it. It isn't actually the two of us that's the problem. It's the adjuncts that we have teaching some of our classes. We have people from CBS teaching some of our classes. Christine teaches a class, and these individuals, we have a limit. They're teaching in their own disciplines, of course, so we have to limit the number of people. So you guys are really kind of lucky. We just let everybody in at the beginning thinking that we wouldn't have that many. But in the future, of course, we're going to have to limit the number of people we have in the program. It's not because of me, or it's not because of her either. It's because of the other people teaching their classes. After we get a third individual, it might change. I don't know. We tried to get that third individual, and he bailed on us on Friday before classes started on Monday. So we'll see what happens in the future. We'll try to find somebody that can and will work here. Of course, the next place, if we hire another person, it's going to be they'll have to teach at Tuba City. And I guess Tuba City is kind of in the middle. It's not like, I don't know. So they'll have to find them housing. He was driving all the way from Flagstaff to Tuba City every day, so that was tough. He didn't like it. This may mean that the practitioner must learn the language of another profession. And of course, that has something to do with the difference between Sarah and I as well. She's a psychologist, And I'm a psychologist and a political scientist and an English teacher, and I worked in medicine for 30 years. So I have knowledge and expertise in other areas that encompass beyond psychology, or they encompass other things than psychology. Every professional must respect the expertise of their professional colleagues, and of course that's not always easy. Sometimes you don't agree. I had a colleague, and I think I've told you this story, I had a colleague at Ashford who didn't believe in mental illness. He thought mental illness was just a misstructure taking place in your brain, some kind of a chemical imbalance taking place. So he didn't really believe in depression or anxiety or anything. It's kind of hard to talk to him. As soon as the DSM-5 came out, I bought a copy of it. It's expensive. It's like $150. I bought a copy of the, actually I only paid $90, I think. But I bought a copy of it, and I said, if you need to look anything up, then I have the DSM-5. And he told me, and this was in front of students, I told him in front of all these students. He said, there's no way in hell I'll ever use I will ever need the DSM-5. I don't believe in it. I think it's well, he called it, he swore. He called it horseshit. He thought it was horseshit. Okay, well that's good to know. Okay, thank you very much. The practitioner working in a team must recognize that different professionals may work toward the same goal using different methods, of course. And of course, Sarah's ideas are a little bit different than mine. Even in the same profession, practitioners may use different approaches. And of course, in order for us to work together, Sarah and I have to respect each other. And she has different ideas than I do. We try not to talk about controversial things that we might disagree on. Takes a while. Those conversations. So we just don't have them anymore. Your supervisor will help evaluate your level of competency by providing feedback about your use of skills, inviting you to engage in self-reflection. And this is the most important thing as far as counseling is concerned. We're talking about self-reflection. So one of the things that you learn when you go through a counseling program is you need to know who you are. You need to know yourself. You need to know what your problems are. These problems are the problems that are going to potentially reflect on your clients. So you need to know what they are. You need to stay away from them. I do have a problem. People leave me. They abandon me. I had a wife that left, that I was so noxious to her that she not only abandoned me, but she abandoned her children. I must be the worst person in the whole wide world. Was that my fault or was that her fault? Are all women that flighty? Do women not care that much about their children? You know, so this is a potential problem. So if I were talking to an individual who had left her husband and left her children with her husband or whatever, I may have a difficult time dealing with her because I may project my problems on her, whatever that problem may potentially be. Do you see what I'm talking about? Okay. So this is something that you have to deal with, and it's something that I have dealt with, of course. Eventually, I was trying to figure out what the hell's wrong with that lady. And I realized, well, maybe it was me, you know. It's kind of like Margaritaville, if you've ever heard the song. He starts out saying there's something wrong with her, then he says, well, maybe it was both of us, and then in the end he says, no, it was me. I was the one that screwed up. Which is usually the way it works. Consultation involves meeting with an expert who can help you solve a particular dilemma or problem. Sometimes your client's problems may be beyond you or your team's ability to handle. This is tough because as a professional, we want to fix everybody. We don't want anybody to be beyond us, something that we can't handle. We have egos, unfortunately, and egos, they come into play from time to time. But sometimes you don't have the expertise to take care of that problem. At that point, you need to call in somebody else. You need to call in a consultant who can actually deal with that problem. Say you're a school counselor and you're trying to deal with students, and you're trained to deal with suicide, you're trained to deal with adolescent angst, and you're trained to deal with minor depression, and you get somebody that is schizophrenic. Well, you don't have any. That isn't A&WE. That's Dr. Pepper. Oh, okay. I apologize. I accused you of drinking. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Joe. I feel like a fool now. Obviously, I don't have the expertise to identify what kind of coffee's drinking. But say you've got somebody with schizophrenia. Well, you're not trained to deal with an adolescent with schizophrenia for a couple different reasons. Schizophrenia in adolescence is a lot more severe than it is if it starts manifesting itself in an adult. The earlier the schizophrenia manifests itself, the more severe it is. So what's a problem? Even if you've dealt with schizophrenia among adults, this is an adolescent. You got to really, this is beyond your expertise as a school counselor. You're not trained to deal with adolescent schizophrenia. Does that make sense? You see what I'm talking about? So you need to call in somebody else. You need to send this kid to somebody else. And at that point, of course, you call in a consultant. And of course, they're always the tall guy with the big white teeth or whatever. Most professionals set ethical guidelines for remaining current with best practices. In other words, you need to read the literature in your field. You need to continue your education. New things are happening all the time. Psychology and social work are two of the fields that are constantly changing. There are new techniques coming out all the time. A lot of times people will come up with new techniques just to get their PhD. You have to write a dissertation, and that's what the whole thing is about. It happens in education too. Irritates the crap out of me. I said crap, I was thinking something else. It irritates me a lot, because these people are just writing this stuff, and they're just writing this stuff in order to get their PhD, or their EDD in education's case. So they're changing practices. They're saying that this is the way that we need to educate our children. They don't care if it works or not. Nobody's tried it yet. So what do? Well, everybody jumps on the bandwagon, and all of a sudden we're educating our children incorrectly. It's not working. And this kind of thing happens in psychology as well. They come up with a new technique, something brand new, and it's just not working. But we need to stay current in these things. And as professionals, you get to decide whether it works or whether it doesn't. That's your job. Just because a PhD from Arizona State, and you love Arizona State, just because a PhD from Arizona State said that this is a new way to do things, you need to judge it yourself to determine if it's going to work or if it's not going to work. That's your job. It's your job to be critical. Just because this guy's smart, just because you read a book that he wrote 20 years ago, doesn't mean that this is going to work. You've got to be critical. Because you're not just trying to be nice to your colleague, you're also trying to fix your clients. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you need to understand that. You need to be the one that's critical. Just because it's a new practice doesn't mean that it's a good way to do things. You need to evaluate your work. Am I actually fixing people, or are we just spinning our wheels? You need to continue education in ethical standards every year. Ethical standards change, and it looks like they're going to go backwards. Under this administration, it looks like they're going to turn back the hands of time. So our ethical standards may change with this administration. We'll see what happens. We're not exactly sure what they're going to come out with. Sometimes the president says one thing, but they never do it. A good example is DACA. What are we going to do with the kids that were brought into the United States from wherever and are undocumented? What are we going to do with these guys? Well, he said he was going to kick them all out. And that made his base really, really happy. But it looks like he's going to compromise with the Democrats. The alt-right, the very conservative people in the United States, they want to just get rid of them. Just put them all in packing boxes and ship them back to El Salvador, Guatemala, and wherever. That's what they want to do with them. So we'll see what happens, because it looks like they're compromising at this point, but we never know. It looks like the ethical standards may move backwards, so we'll change the ethical standards that we're dealing with. What are the ethical standards in Phoenix? What are the ethical standards in Santa Fe? Are they different? And the answer is probably yes, since Arizona's more conservative than New Mexico is. Two worst places in the United States to raise a child, New Mexico and Arizona, as it turns out. I know, I was shocked. Yes, ma'am.
I'm surprised that I'm not really surprised, but I am. When I was a LPN, when I first graduated from school, I worked at a hospital that was kind of open to mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that there's a lot of women coming from Mexico, and they would conveniently be in the United States
To have their babies.
to have their baby.
Sure.
And that was exactly the time that when they were due.
Sure.
Man, they were there. And at that time, if your child was born in the United States, they were an automatic citizen.
They are.
And the
Still are.
mother could stay.
Right.
I don't know if they had to have visas or not, but,
They don't.
and then they always wound up on welfare. So that was one of the big bugaboos that went through the area, especially
Sure.
working people
Sure.
who's supporting this program.
Right. Right.
So-
That's still, the laws are still the same.
But are they gonna kick these little kids out that were born here?
Oh, no.
To
No, they can't.
immigrants?
Those are American citizens. Wherever you're born, you're a citizen of that country. No matter what your ethnicity is. Doesn't really matter what your ethnicity is. Anybody born in the United States is an American citizen.
Okay.
Okay.
So
The question is what are they going to do with the parents?
Yeah.
Yeah,
parents.
that was my
Yeah.
next question. What do we do with the parents? then?
Exactly.
Send them back and keep the kids?
You
Not.
No, you can't separate families. And see, that's been part of the problem all along.
Yeah.
What if the child is Mexican, and one of the parents is naturalized? Do we send their children back to Mexico? You know, if only one parent is naturalized, and that happens a lot. Only one parent gets naturalized. If they don't both get naturalized, it's too expensive. So, you know, the father or the mother will become naturalized, and the children are citizens of another country. Do we send them back? And that's what DACA is all about. These are the dreamers that they're talking about. These individuals, and also the dreamers were these kids were born in Mexico, brought to the United States as babies, or as toddlers, or as even elementary school students. Now they're Americans. They've been here for 10, 15, 20 years. Do we ship them back? Do we ship them out of the country? That's the question.
Boy, that's culture shock unlimited.
It will be. These people have never lived in their home country, El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, wherever it may happen to be. I mean, we think of all of these individuals as coming from Mexico, but the reality is they come from all over Central and South America as well. They don't just come from the Americas, they also come from Europe. We have Irish going to Canada and coming down into the United States. I mean, there's hundreds of them. They did a study in 1990 in Boston, and they looked at 200 women from Ireland, and only 100 of them are citizens of the United States. The rest of them are illegal immigrants, and they're from Ireland. And you don't think of the Irish as, you know.
There's Italians that do that too.
Yeah, sure, Italians. There's people from all over the world that come to the United States and they're not citizens. Or they come in on a visa and then they just stay here. They never leave, even though their visa has run out. They're not students anymore. I had a student from Bangladesh came over here. We educated him. We gave him scholarships to educate him. And he was allowed to stay in the United States for 2 years after he graduated. And they just shipped him back to Bangladesh in June. He's trying to get back. He wants to come back to the United States to get his master's degree. But really strange situation. Okay, so we have to stay current on all of these things. While the practitioner is responsible for structuring the relationship with the client, success can only be reached if the relationship is collaborative, you work together, goal-directed, you know where you're going, purposeful, you're trying to fix this person, or trying to help them anyway, and time-limited. They can't be your client forever. You need to fix them. You need to make them feel like they're okay now. That's what I mean by fix. It's not like you're a mechanic and you're adjusting something in their brain. It's not the way it works. But you need to fix them. If you never fix anybody, then what are you doing there? If you never make anybody feel like they're okay, then what are you doing there? So it has to be time limited, purposeful, goal directed. This is what we're working on. This is where we're headed. I want you to feel secure about these things, and it needs to be collaborative. You're going to get clients, and they will come in, especially people that aren't from the United States. If you get somebody from, let's say somebody from China, they're of Chinese background. They will want you, they don't want to talk, they want you to tell them what's wrong. It's a totally different situation. You know, people in the United States, they want to talk, they want you to help them, but just shut up so that they can talk. That's what they want. Asians, you won't be able to get the second word out of them. They'll tell you their name and that's it. Now they want you to tell them what's wrong, and they want you to tell them how to fix themselves. Okay, so you need to be collaborative, and of course it all depends on who they are as to how collaborative they will actually be. I have no idea how it's going to work on the reservation. I don't know. I've never counseled somebody from this reservation. I counsel people from another reservation, but they're not the same as you guys are. So I have no clue. I don't know. If we hire the new social worker, we have an application. She's from my home state of Indiana. How much has she worked with American Indians? There aren't any American Indians in Indiana. And even if they were, they wouldn't, they would probably not recognize themselves as native. As confusing as that is. Relationship between client and practitioner is a fiduciary relationship. I love this word fiduciary. Banks are fiduciary trusts. What does fiduciary mean? It means you have confidence in that organization. So they call themselves fiduciary as if everybody who comes and gives them money trusts them. The client has confidence and trust in the practitioner's competency, and that's what fiduciary means. I think it's a cool word. My dad was a banker, so you could trust my dad, but I'm not sure you could trust the board of directors of his bank. Okay. The unique nature of professional relationships, the reality is it's an unequal relationship. We've talked about this before. The practitioner has power and the client doesn't. And for this reason, if you develop a relationship with a client, then potentially what's going to happen is if you are the practitioner and they are the client, yeah, okay. So there's a power imbalance going on. So you really shouldn't do that because you have more power than they do. With power comes a responsibility to help the client in the manner prescribed initially by the practitioner, of course. So there is a power difference between the two of you, and that shouldn't happen. You shouldn't develop a relationship because you're always going to be in charge. You're always going to be the one trying to fix things, and the other person is going to have a subordinate relationship. Now this is actually, if you do create a relationship with this individual, this is codependency, where they are completely dependent on you. And they will recognize that. They are like somebody that wants you to tell them what to do. And that's what codependency is. You are dependent on them being in charge. Codependency. So if you're dealing with somebody with a codependency problem, you're probably dealing with the individual, with this individual. You're dealing with the subordinate individual because they have no power of their own. And if you try to give them power, they don't want it. They want this person to be in charge, to boss them around. Now, strangely enough, we live in a world where almost all the religious structures put one person in charge and the other person not in charge. And as far as Christianity is concerned, the males are supposed to be in charge, right? Isn't that the way it works?
In some cases.
It's the way almost all the Muslim religion, who's in charge? Males again. The Hindu religion, who's in charge? Males again. Are there any religions that it's equal?
Maybe New Age?
Not world religions, that's for sure. I don't know about the New Age religion. I'm not a practitioner.
No, New Age.
New Age?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. Those guys are so freaky, I have no clue. Am I picking on New Age people? Yes. Are they my favorite people? No. Okay, 4 and 5. Let me see. I'm sure they're fine.
Maybe talk about this and when they're due, or am
What
I
are we
just
talking
missing
about?
out somewhere?
When things are due? I put that in my
Okay, do it.
email.
What's this one?
Oh, the mental health. Yeah, so I've replaced this one. Yeah, go ahead, just throw that out. If you've
Okay.
already done it, you can turn it in that way, but we need to also put it online.
I made a copy of that.
Okay.
It's online now, so.
My computer was stolen, so
Okay, you'll have to,
I have to buy a whole new computer and printer.
okay, we'll have to figure it out then. Okay, it's online, I just sent you an email
Okay.
with it attached, so.
Okay.
But we still can use this and get ideas.
Yeah, you could, yeah, that's 8 pages long, the other one's like 5 or something, so it'll be a little bit easier. It's a history, just like you're going to be filling out when you start working at wherever you're working. You'll be filling out these histories on your clients. That's the first thing you'll do, is fill out the history, to give you a background on what you're dealing with. So, when is this due? Let's say the beginning of October, how's that? The history plus the paper. The paper deals with whatever your problem is. I want you to research it so that you can figure out how to act. And give yourself a clue as to how to act. Of course, this has nothing to do with you because it is a problem that you have never had. Nobody around you has that problem. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm not sure how much counseling we can do. Last time we did a lot. And it helped people a lot because you get used to talking to people with problems. And it's good practice. It's practice is all it is. But it's kind of nice to understand that you can do it. It will give you confidence when you actually start counseling, when you take the next class. So it's just good practice. And we can see how unethical it is. Okay. What are we doing? We're developing working relationships.
Did you do chapter 4 this morning too?
Yeah, that was chapter 4. I just finished. Yeah, I went through the whole chapter. It's only 18 slides.
Okay.
I don't really talk that fast. I always tell stories. I apologize. Okay, as a practitioner, one of the things you're going to have to decide is how much of yourself you disclose. A practitioner should begin a professional relationship by determining how they will present themselves and how they will behave. You need to be genuine. If you're not genuine, the client will read that. And they will assume that there's you're trying to hide something from them. It is important for the practitioner to set aside their personal feelings and concerns in order to fully focus on their client. So you have to, and we've discussed this, everybody agrees the hardest person to counsel will be a pedophile. We all hate pedophiles. The most god-awful person in the whole wide world, a pedophile. I've counseled pedophiles before. And it's hard to ungrit your teeth so that you can talk to these people. But they have rationales as to why they have done what they've done. And that's what you need to determine. You need to, something has happened in their past that has created this situation. And now you have to figure out what it is. It's not easy. It's hard. It's hard not to reach over and bitch slap the person. Did I say bitch slap? I know. It's tough. It's really, really hard. It's hard to talk to somebody that's murdered somebody. Really, really hard. Because none of it makes any sense. There's no logic to it. All right, do they have a problem? Well, that's what you have to determine. What kind of a problem they have. And we talked about this before as well. It is important that a practitioner accepts and understands the client's beliefs, whatever those beliefs may happen to be, their perceptions, their stereotypes, their biases, their prejudices, and their life experiences. You need to learn what all of these things are and accept them. It's the only way that you're going to get them to talk. There are two people that you will never ever be able to get through to. One of them is somebody who has antisocial personality disorder. They are the biggest liars in the world. Second, they are first, and second is somebody that's an alcoholic or a drug addict. It's one of the reasons why it's so hard to deal with these people. You can fix drug addicts. Antisocial personality disorder, they will never, ever tell you the truth. They'll tell you whatever you want to hear. That's how they get away with all the crap that they get away with. Okay.
What was the first one?
Antisocial personality disorder. The other's alcoholic. Biggest liars in the world. If you've got somebody that's a sociopath or a psychopath, wow, forget it. And the other difficult person to deal with is somebody who has obsessive compulsive disorder. They've got a loop going around in their brain. And if you can get to one point over here, but it always loops back to the same obsession and the same compulsion. You have to convince them to go against their obsession or their compulsion, which is tough. It's possible, but it's tough. So the two people that you won't be able to deal with are people with antisocial personality disorder, psychopaths, and sociopaths. These individuals are liars. They are pathological liars. I told you about the mouse in my office, didn't I? I told somebody about the mouse in my office.
You had
So
one?
I had just gotten there. Yeah, I saw him run past my door, and evidently he came in. Maybe it's a different mouse.
Maybe you brought a friend.
So I'm working, I got a friend. I'm working on my computer, and all of a sudden he runs up the wall. He sees me and goes back down. And about 15 minutes later, he jumped up on my desk, saw me, and then jumped off my desk. I'm hoping he leaves while my lights turned out.
It just wants to play.
Okay, fine. These guys still have hantavirus here, and that's what I'm afraid of. Anyway, beliefs, perceptions, stereotypes. You've got to accept all of these things. Unless you can accept these things, you're never going to be able to talk to this person. They're never going to tell you anything. You have to accept their beliefs, their perceptions, their stereotypes, their biases, their prejudices, and life experiences. I have a difficult time dealing with people that are intolerant. Well, that can't possibly be true because I've got all these people on my Facebook page. I haven't looked at Facebook for 3 months. But I've got some really alt-right people on my Facebook page.
Do you have some Navajos on there?
No, I don't have any Navajos on my Facebook page, not yet. I have people from up north, I have a lot of people from up north, but half the people on my Facebook page are from Fort Belknap. They keep showing me pictures of what they had for breakfast. Nice. But they also send me pictures of what's going on the reservation. Of course, I was up there for 10 years, so it's always interesting. I get the newspaper from up north just to see who died. You know, I know, it's kind of Greenish, isn't it? The core interpersonal qualities that a practitioner brings to the relationship include warmth, the fact that you respect everybody, your genuineness, and this is why you have to be your own person, empathy and acceptance. And that's not the easiest thing in the world. This is tough. Okay, so you have to learn all of these things. If you think you're going to be a counselor and tell people what to do, then you're probably in the wrong field. If you want to tell people what to do, you need to become a supervisor, and then you can tell them what to do. You have to accept people for who they are, for whatever they are, which is never easy. That's why I keep getting into conversations that last for like ever. I'm sitting on the airplane, and all of a sudden the guy starts talking to me, and I'm not saying jack, okay? But this guy just will not shut up. Why? Because, I don't know, I must have something written across my forehead that says, talk to me. Or, I won't judge you or something. I try to be judgmental, I just can't do it. Trust can be developed by being understanding and empathic, listening attentively, and showing respect. And I guess this is what's going on with me. So I get into long conversations with my colleagues. I want to get in long conversations with my students. That's okay, it doesn't bother me at all. But people just like to talk to me. Last time I was home, my brother talked to me. I was really excited. He never talks to anybody. He talked to me. Warmth, being kind and accepting in a non-judgmental way. Expression of warmth is one culture, in one culture may be perceived differently in another culture, and this is something that you have to be, well, I told you before, up north everybody hugs everybody else. When they say hello, they hug each other. Not so much down here, not so much hugging going on down here. Some cultures, you never touch the other individual. In the white culture, in some areas, they touch cheeks. The French do this, they're big cheek touchers. Not that kind of touching, but they touch each other's cheeks with their cheek. I think they go left, and they go right, and they go in the middle. Okay, there you go. Okay, that's French. It really all depends on the culture as to what you do. I told you in Korea, when you see somebody, you bow to them. That's Korea, yeah, this is Korea. That's Buddhist people, they do that, they put their hands together. In Japan, you don't put your hands together. You bow with your hands on your thighs. Making eye contact. Making eye contact for the entire bow. Obama bowed to somebody, I can't remember who it was, the king of Saudi Arabia, he bowed to him. And people go, oh my God, Obama's making us subordinate to the Saudis. But that's their culture, of course. Donald Trump's handshake is fascinating. I don't know if you've ever watched him shake hands with somebody. He shakes hands and pulls them toward him. Grab a hold of their other arm. That's one of those kind of deals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they made a big deal about he shook hands with the president of France, and he wouldn't let it, he didn't move. You know, they're two of them. Oh, it's one of those kind of deals. Interesting. I don't know. I don't like to be yanked around. I'm not exactly sure what would happen if I tried to shake hands with Donald Trump. He weighs like 300 pounds. 6'5", 300 pounds. You know, I'm 180 pounds, 5'6". I don't know. We'll see what happens next. I'm sure you yank me around like crazy. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's emotions, feelings, thoughts, and behavior from the person's viewpoint. That's empathy. So you not only understand all of this stuff, but it's from their viewpoint. It's not from your viewpoint, it's from their viewpoint. And that is empathy. Understanding what they're feeling, how they're reacting to things. As we attune to another person's internal state, a feeling of being connected develops. Being empathic involves having the willingness and flexibility to put yourself in the other person's reality. And that's not the easiest thing in the world. Their reality is different from your reality. Everybody's reality is different from yours. I have a friend that thinks that the world is the most dangerous place is very, very dangerous. He carries a pistol on his hip and a shotgun in his car, under his seat. It's a sawed-off shotgun. It's against the law. It's like this long. It's a Mossberg. I don't know if you know what that is. But it holds, I don't know, 5 shells or something. And he's got slugs in there, just in case somebody tries to do something to him. He's going to protect himself with his Mossberg and his Glock 45. He's got a Glock 45 he carries with him wherever he goes. My world isn't that dangerous. I don't have any weapons, none whatsoever. I can't even tell you where the knives are in my house. And this guy has guns all over his house in hidden places. That's how dangerous the world is that he lives in. It was the same place I do. What the hell's going on here? Why is his world so much more dangerous? Because he doesn't trust other people. That's what his problem is. Anyway, I'm trying to be empathic for. He was a cop, so I'd want to kill him too if the guy had ever jacked me up. Anyway, let's stop right here. We'll pick this up next time. And I'll talk more about Danny, my buddy, who